The rain came down hard, drumming against the hood of Calla Morgan's coat like a warning. Her shoes were soaked through, the sidewalk a river she had no choice but to wade through. She pulled her collar tighter around her neck, clutching the paper bag with half-price noodles from the corner spot. Tonight's dinner, if you could call it that. She didn't plan to stop. But the SUV parked awkwardly at the curb had its hazards blinking, a faint rhythm in the storm. She slowed. Inside, a man sat slumped behind the wheel, head low, motionless. Steam fogged the glass, but something about the stillness made her chest tighten. She knocked. No movement. Another knock. Louder. This time, the figure shifted. His face turned slightly. He looked straight at her through the fogged glass, eyes blank and distant, like he wasn't entirely there. She should have walked away. Instead, she opened the door. That's when everything started. Calla Morgan wasn't trying to be anyone's hero. She was just tired. Tired of scraping tips into envelopes labeled rent, electric, and someday. Tired of customers who snapped their fingers, managers who acted like her dreams were a joke, and a job that felt like a cage she couldn't quite escape. 26 years old and already behind on everything. Bills, goals, life. Every evening, she dragged herself home past glowing high-rises that belonged to people who had personal drivers, chefs, maybe even indoor waterfalls. People who never had to choose between Wi-Fi and dinner. She wasn't one of them. Never had been. Probably never would be. So, when she saw that man, alone in a car that probably cost more than her entire existence, she didn't think of fate, or magic, or opportunity. She thought, this looks bad. Someone should check on him. Just another rainy night. Just another city street. Just another stranger. She didn't know it yet, but that one moment was about to shift her entire reality. The man said his name was Darian. He barely whispered it. Slurred, even. A mixture of exhaustion and something stronger on his breath. He tried to wave her off, told her he was fine, but his eyes betrayed him. He wasn't. Calla wasn't sure what made her do it. Maybe it was the way his head leaned too hard against the seat, like gravity was dragging more than just his body. Maybe it was how he tried to smile, but his lips trembled. Either way, she helped him into the passenger seat of his car. Just tell me where to go, she said, slipping into the driver's side, rain still dripping from her hair. The neighborhood they pulled into looked like a different planet. Guarded gates, trimmed hedges, houses that could fit 10 of hers inside. She dropped him off, expecting nothing. But 2 days later, someone showed up at her job. A sharply dressed assistant, holding a sealed envelope. A thank you note? No, it was an invitation to a world she didn't belong in. Yet, inside the envelope wasn't just a note, it was an offer, a job. At his company. A role she hadn't applied for, didn't even know existed. It came with a title that felt made up, a paycheck that nearly made her cry, and access to a life she'd only ever seen through restaurant windows. It felt like a mistake, or a dream, or both. But when she walked into that building, polished floors, quiet power, all eyes on her, Darian was waiting. Not the lost man from the car, but someone focused, magnetic, unreadable. He simply said, I remember what it's like to be overlooked. And so began Calla's new life. A seat at the table, a front row view into the world of money, decisions, and secrets. But what she didn't know, every seat comes with strings, and hers came tied to a man battling more than the public ever saw. What would you do if helping a stranger gave you everything you dreamed of, but at a cost you never saw coming? Hit subscribe because of Calla's story? It's just getting started. Calla Morgan's shoes squished with every step, her socks soaked, her toes frozen. The diner had closed 30 minutes late again. No surprise. The manager always found a reason to keep them longer, and Calla never argued. She needed the hours. Rent was overdue, and she was already dodging calls from her landlord. She pulled her hoodie tighter as the wind cut through her threadbare coat. Her breath rose in little clouds, disappearing as quickly as her patience. 2 shifts back to back. No tip from table 6. Blister on her heel. $27 in her pocket. This was life lately. Her dreams of culinary school on hold. Again. She'd promised herself by 25 she'd be running her cafe. Instead, she was slinging reheated fries to customers who didn't care if she smiled or cried. She didn't even hear the thunder at first. She was too tired to flinch, but the flash of lights caught her attention. Up ahead, near the curb, a black SUV sat idle, blinkers ticking quietly against the downpour. Most people would have walked faster, kept their heads down. But Calla wasn't most people. She slowed, hesitant. A glance, no movement inside. The engine was on, exhaust rising in soft puffs from the back. Whoever was in there hadn't moved in minutes. She stepped closer, one hand on her phone, ready to call for help if she had to. The window was fogged, but she could just make out a figure inside. Male, still, slumped. Her fingers tapped gently against the glass. "Hey, are you okay?" Nothing. She knocked again, this time harder. The man stirred, barely. His head turned. When their eyes met through the condensation, she felt it in her chest. Not fear, not exactly. It was the look in his eyes, like something had caved in. Calla hesitated. Something told her to keep walking. She didn't know this man, didn't owe him anything. But something deeper pulled at her, not sympathy, not pity, something quieter. A gut feeling she couldn't name. She knocked again, more firmly. This time, the man reached for the window. It rolled down halfway, dragging slowly like it hadn't been used in months. He looked younger than she expected. Late 30s, maybe. Drenched hair plastered to his forehead. His suit jacket, wrinkled and damp, hung loosely off his shoulders. But it was his face that made her pause. He looked lost, not in the geographical sense, but like he didn't know where he was in life anymore. "You good?" she asked, keeping her voice low, cautious. He blinked slowly, like the question took effort. "Not really," he muttered. "Just needed to stop for a second." His voice was calm, controlled, but hollow. "You drinking?" she asked. He laughed once. "Bitter, yeah." That obvious. Calla shifted her weight. "You can't stay parked here like this. You're going to draw attention." "I was hoping someone would notice," he said under his breath. She caught it, but didn't respond right away. He looked back at her, eyes rimmed red. "Do you believe in starting over?" She stared at him, unsure what to say. "I believe in not freezing to death in your car." A flicker of a smile. "Fair point." She scanned the interior. The passenger seat is empty. No one else is around. No ID badge, no clear story. But her instincts told her this wasn't some random guy. "I can call someone," she offered. He shook his head. "There's no one to call." Silence. Only the steady tick of the hazard lights and the tap of rain on metal. She made a choice. "Scoot over." "What?" "You're not driving like this. I'll take you home." He blinked. "You don't even know me." "Nope." "Why would you do that?" Calla opened the door, climbed in, gripped the steering wheel. "Because you look like you need it." He moved over, slow and unsteady. When he sat beside her, he gave his address. She didn't recognize the street, but the name, she'd seen it before. News articles, magazine covers, Darien Vale. A tech mogul turned recluse. A recent headline, "Vale Corp in crisis, COO under fire for embezzlement scandal." Calla's hands tightened on the wheel. This wasn't just any stranger. The name sat heavily in Calla's mind as she pulled onto the road. Darien Vale. She remembered seeing it a few months back, splashed across the news on the diner's mounted TV. It had played between back-to-back burger commercials while she wiped down ketchup-smeared tables. Tech visionary, business giant, betrayed by his right hand. Darien Vale was once on every podcast, quoted in business columns, and the face of ambitious brilliance. Vale Corp wasn't just his company, it was his obsession. Built from the ground up, it rose fast. Too fast, some critics said. He had charm and ideas, but trusted the wrong man. His chief operating officer, once his college roommate, had funneled millions into private accounts, lavish parties, offshore shell companies. While Darian had been delivering speeches about innovation, his empire was being hollowed out. The scandal broke hard. The media devoured him. Headlines were ruthless. Some painted him as careless. Others hinted he was complicit. No charges were brought against him, but in the public's eyes, he was guilty of something worse than fraud: naivety. The company's stock plummeted. Investors fled. His board turned on him. In less than a month, he stepped down for reflection. In truth, he was pushed out. Calla side-eyed him in the passenger seat now. He didn't look like a man who once owned skyscrapers. He looked like someone barely holding it together. Darian leaned his head back, eyes closed. "You know who I am, don't you?" She hesitated. "I've seen your face before, that's all." He nodded slowly. "Lucky you." A silence stretched out between them, one that didn't need filling. They were two people from completely different worlds, joined only by circumstance and rain. "I didn't steal anything," he said quietly. "Just in case you were wondering." Calla kept her eyes on the road. "Wasn't my place to ask." He gave a tired smile. "You're different." She didn't answer, because she wasn't sure that was true. The ride to Darian's house was quiet. Not tense, just still, like both of them were waiting for the other to speak first, but neither did. Calla gripped the steering wheel tighter, blinking against the rain-dotted windshield. The GPS ticked down the minutes. She didn't know what part of town she was in anymore, not her side of it. When the gates opened to a private driveway, Calla almost stopped right there. The property ahead didn't look like a home. It looked like a museum. Sleek stone, glass walls, the kind of lighting that came from the ground instead of overhead. She slowed to a crawl. "This is it?" "Yeah," Darian replied softly. "You can pull up to the front." The house loomed ahead, quiet and cold. As she parked, he didn't move to get out. "You okay?" she asked. "I should be," he said, not making eye contact. "This is the part where I thank you, pay you something generous, and disappear for another 6 months. Calla tilted her head. "That's what you normally do?" "No," he said. "Usually I suffer in silence." He opened the door but paused before stepping out. "Can I ask something strange?" She raised an eyebrow. "Will you come inside?" Calla froze. She wasn't reckless. She knew what this sounded like, but his voice didn't carry any suggestion. No flirtation, just a quiet sort of desperation she couldn't name. "I don't know you," she said. "I know. And I don't make a habit of walking into strangers' houses. You shouldn't." Another pause. "But I don't want to be alone right now." That did it. Something in his tone, low, shaky, controlled, tugged at her instincts. It wasn't about attraction. It was about something deeper, the kind of loneliness that clung to people long after the crowd left. Calla glanced at the storm still raging outside. Her clothes were already soaked. She had nothing to rush home to. No one is waiting, just a damp apartment and silence. So she made a choice. 15 minutes, she said firmly. "I stay by the door. You drink water. You don't pass out again." He smiled faintly. Deal. 2 days had passed since that stormy night. Calla had convinced herself it was over, just a strange moment in a long list of strange days. She'd half wondered if Darian even remembered her. But when the sleek black car pulled up outside the diner, every head in the kitchen turned. The driver stepped out first. Crisp suit, polished shoes. Not the kind of man who asks for coffee to go. Calla Morgan? She was elbow-deep in dishes when her manager called her from the back. "Someone's asking for you, and he's not from around here." She wiped her hands on a towel, confused. "What do you mean?" The hostess peeked around the corner. "Girl, he's wearing a watch that probably costs more than this building." When Calla stepped out, the man offered a polite nod. "Miss Morgan, Mr. Vale asked that I escort you to his office." Calla blinked. "I think you've got the wrong person." "No, ma'am. He was very specific." The assistant held out a sealed envelope. Inside was a card, gold lettering. A note. "Thank you for not walking away. I'd like to return the gesture. In person. Car's waiting if you're curious. No pressure." Darian. Behind her, the entire front-of-house staff was pretending not to stare. Her co-worker Jay mouthed, "Is that a Maybach?" The manager tried to act unaffected. "Well, if you're going, don't forget to clock out." Calla stood frozen for a beat. This wasn't part of her day. It didn't feel real. She glanced back at the car. The driver stood by, unbothered, as if picking up waitresses in luxury vehicles was routine. "I only have like $30 in my account," she muttered. "Won't need it," the assistant said with a small smile. She looked at the envelope again, at her apron, at the stunned faces around her, and without fully understanding why, she untied her apron, grabbed her coat, and walked out to the car. The ride was silent, not awkward, just surreal. Calla sank into leather seats softer than any mattress she'd owned. The city blurred past the tinted windows, and with every turn, the life she knew felt farther behind. The silence returned the moment she closed the door. Darian stood in his foyer for several seconds after Calla left, still clutching the glass of water she'd insisted he drink. He didn't say goodbye. He couldn't. He barely managed to nod. He hated silence now. Not the peaceful kind. The echoing, sharp kind that made every footstep sound like an accusation. He walked through his penthouse like a stranger, as if the walls no longer remembered him. Furniture he once picked out with care now looked staged, lifeless. The open concept space, which once buzzed with meetings, late-night coding sessions, laughter, now swallowed him whole. He dropped the glass into the sink and watched it tilt sideways, still half full. Then he sat on the edge of the couch and let his shoulders fall. For the first time in weeks, he didn't reach for his phone, didn't scroll, didn't draft any fake apology messages to shareholders. He just sat. The flashbacks came as they always did. The COO, his longtime friend, standing in front of the board, expression cool, rehearsed. There were some discrepancies in the funding. "I'm as shocked as you are, Darian." The boardroom's tension. The sound of someone clearing their throat. The documents spread out on the mahogany table like evidence at a trial. They didn't even let him speak that day. They had already made their decision. His name had become a warning, a case study. And yet, 2 nights ago, soaking wet and drunk on grief, a stranger had looked at him, not as a broken figure, but as a man in need. Calla didn't ask for anything, didn't press for details. She just helped. And in that simple gesture, something cracked open. That night, Darian didn't go to his bedroom. He stayed on the couch, legs curled up like a child's. At some point, he turned on a small lamp and stared at the light for hours, not seeing it. He should have felt embarrassed, but he didn't. He felt human. When morning came, he didn't feel fixed, but he felt aware. Like the numbness had shifted, just slightly. And for the first time in a long while, he reached for something real. He found her name on the rideshare receipt. And before he could talk himself out of it, he told his assistant, "Go to her. Don't pressure her. Just ask." The elevator opened directly into his home. Calla had never seen anything like it. No hallway, no keycard buzz. Just marble floors stretching into a living space that looked like it belonged in one of those glossy magazines at the salon. The ceilings soared. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a skyline most people only saw in calendars. Neutral tones, glass surfaces and steel accents, understated but intimidating. It was beautiful. And cold. Darian stood near the far end of the room, dressed in a black turtleneck and tailored slacks. A sharp contrast from the crumpled, unsteady version of him she'd met that night. He looked collected, but Calla had seen beneath it once, and she couldn't forget that. "Hey," he said simply, hands in his pockets. "Hi," she replied, suddenly unsure of her voice. He nodded toward a nearby sofa. "You want to sit?" She did, but she didn't. She didn't know what she was doing here. "I'm guessing this isn't just about saying thanks," she said, standing still. He offered a small smile. "It's not." A pause stretched between them. Calla slowly stepped in, crossing the wide living space, each step echoing lightly beneath her boots. She sat, perched at the edge of a cushion that probably cost more than a month's rent. He sat across from her, a respectful distance. Look, I know this is weird, he said. You didn't sign up for anything. But I wanted to talk to you. Without press, without spin. Calla folded her arms. So talk. Darian took a breath. That night, ... You didn't ask who I was. You didn't flinch when you recognized me. You just helped. That's what people do. Not always. He stood and walked to the window, watching the traffic below. I used to think I could control everything, build something flawless, vet every partner, secure every corner. A bitter chuckle slipped out. I didn't see the one closest to me carving pieces out of my name. Calla's brows furrowed. She didn't know all the details, but she knew betrayal when she heard it. I lost more than a company, Darian said quietly. I lost the part of myself that believed in others. He turned to face her. Until you... The words hung in the air, too heavy and too raw. Calla wasn't sure what to say. She wasn't anyone's redemption story. She was just a girl trying to get by. Still, something about the way he looked at her, like she reminded him of something worth holding on to, made her stay. Darian poured himself a glass of water and sat back down. He didn't rush. There was no sales pitch in his voice, no performance, just a man talking, carefully. I brought him in when we were both 24, he began. Back then, it was just an idea, a platform to help local vendors manage inventory. He handled numbers. I handled the tech. He sipped. We lived in the same one-bedroom for a year, ate noodles, shared bank passwords. I trusted him with everything. Calla listened quietly, fingers clasped in her lap. For almost a decade, he handled the finances. Smoothly, cleanly. Until last year, when an internal audit flagged some unusual transfers, Darian shook his head. I thought it was a glitch. I defended him, publicly. Stood in front of investors and told them, there's no issue. We're solid. Calla could imagine it. The weight of pride. The pressure to protect someone who had once been family. They opened the books, he continued. He'd been bleeding the company for over 2 years. Offshore accounts, fake vendors, even had a ghost payroll system under a different subsidiary. Calla blinked. And you had no idea? I saw what I wanted to see. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. I've spent the last 6 months being called careless, blind, and reckless. Maybe I was... You weren't the one stealing, she said. No, but I left the door open, trusted someone to guard it. That's on me. His voice didn't shake, but it was quieter now, worn. People think betrayal is loud, like a scream or a public explosion, but it isn't. It's small. Paper-thin lies stacked over years until one day the whole structure just collapses. Calla absorbed his words. She'd never been betrayed in business, but she knew what it felt like to be let down slowly, by family, by promises, by life. He stood and walked over to a cabinet, opened it, pulled out a manila folder and set it on the table between them. What's that? She asked. Your name, your background. I had my team look into you. Her eyes narrowed. That's supposed to make me feel what? Flattered? No. But it made me feel safer offering what I'm about to. He slid the folder aside. You don't have a polished resume, no degrees, no elite references. But you have something else. She stayed silent, waiting. You showed up, he said, without motive, without expectation. You have instinct, Calla, and that's something I've learned to value more than titles. Calla folded her arms. What exactly are you offering? Darian hesitated, then said, a job. Not permanent, just temporary. A trial. Calla blinked. Doing what? We'll get to that. Calla leaned back, blinking slowly. A job, she repeated. Darian nodded once. You'd be working with me. Closely. For a few weeks. Think of it as support. Organizational. Strategic feedback. She stared at him like he was speaking another language. I work in a diner. I know. I don't have a degree. Also know. I've never even set foot in a corporate office. Still not a deal breaker. Her voice rose slightly. You're talking about strategy and business and trust. I don't belong in your world, Darian. You didn't belong in that storm either, he replied calmly. But you showed up anyway. That shut her up. He went on, I don't need someone with a business degree. I've had those. They nodded when things looked fine on paper, even when something felt wrong. He looked her dead in the eye. What I need is someone who sees what others miss, who calls things out when they don't add up, who isn't trying to impress anyone. She shook her head slowly. But I don't know how to do any of that. In your world, you don't have to, he said. I'll teach you the ropes, the systems, the players. But what if I mess up? Then we course correct. That's it. It sounded too simple, too forgiving. No one had ever offered her a chance without demanding twice as much in return. Calla looked away. Her throat tightened. I've worked in places where I had to ask permission to use the bathroom. One wrong look got me sent home. And now you're asking me to sit in rooms I don't belong in? I'm not asking you to fit in, Darian said. I'm asking you to be you, in a space that could use more of it. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Why me? He stood and paced slowly. Because I've seen what ambition without conscience looks like, and I've lived through what loyalty used for leverage becomes. He turned to face her again. You looked at me like a person, not a brand, not a paycheck, not a headline. Calla looked down at her hands, her chipped nail polish, her scuffed boots. Nothing about her screamed worthy of this kind of opportunity, but something in his words cracked through the wall she'd kept up for years. He wasn't just trying to save himself, he was trying to trust again. And somehow, he thought she could help him do that. The elevator doors opened with a hush, and Calla stepped into a world that moved too fast, spoke too confidently, and looked nothing like her. Every hallway gleamed. Every face that passed her wore tailored clothing, unreadable expressions, and just the right touch of disinterest. She'd barely stepped onto the top floor of Vale Corp when someone breezed by her and said into their headset, "No, tell him he needs to walk back the proposal or we walk away, period." She flinched slightly. Miss Morgan, a young woman with clipped bangs and an expression like she'd already decided Calla didn't belong, motioned her forward. "You'll be in the glass office across from Mr. Vale's. You're not on the internal schedule yet, but I've added you to the briefing thread." Calla followed her, trying to absorb everything at once. The clicks of keyboards, snippets of jargon, the overwhelming scent of espresso and cold ambition. Inside her small but pristine office, a laptop waited. A tablet. 3 color-coded folders labeled Legal, Comms, and Budget Forecast Q4. Calla blinked. I don't even know where to start. I'd suggest reading the comms deck. You're expected to sit in on the operations update in an hour. Wait, I'm supposed to speak in a meeting. You're not expected to say anything, the assistant replied dryly. Just observe. For now, Calla barely had time to breathe before her inbox flooded with 27 unread emails and 3 flagged attachments marked urgent. The next hour felt like survival. She skimmed through presentations filled with acronyms she didn't know, Googled terms under her desk, and made quiet notes in the margins. She was on her 3rd sip of lukewarm coffee when she saw it, a line item buried deep in a purchase order summary. A recurring vendor, Greyco Analytics, billed twice for the same services, 5 figures each time. That can't be right. She looked again. The line items were identical, down to the memo field. But each invoice had a different approval trail, both approved, both paid. Calla frowned. Either someone made a mistake, or someone hoped no one would notice. Before she could dig further, the operations meeting began. She slipped into the back of the glass-walled conference room. Darian was already there, flanked by a half-circle of executives, half of whom barely glanced at her as she entered. The presentation was clean, impressive, filled with charts, growth projections, and enough buzzwords to make her dizzy. Calla tried to follow until her eyes landed on something. Another slide showing vendor breakdowns. Greyco Analytics appeared again. Twice. Again. She leaned forward slightly. A woman seated near the front, pressed blazer, sleek ponytail, glanced back at her with a look that wasn't quite friendly. After the meeting, Darian caught up to Calla in the hallway. How was your first hour? Fast, she said. And I think someone's double charging you. That got his attention. Who? Grey Company, I'll send you the files. I found them in the Q4 projections. He stared at her a beat. That's the kind of thing even our finance team misses. She shrugged. I was probably the only one reading slow enough to see it. His smile was small but real. Keep reading slowly then. But as she returned to her office, Calla noticed the side glances. The whispers. Someone had already decided she was a problem. By noon, word had spread. The new girl, no resume, no background in finance, no Ivy League handshake, had flagged a vendor error before the accounting team. To some, it was impressive. To most, it was a threat. The next board briefing took place in a different room, one twice the size, with a view that spanned the skyline. Calla sat at the edge, not because she wanted to, but because no one offered a seat closer. Across from her, a senior executive, Mr. Sorrell, glanced up from his notes with faint amusement. Miss Morgan, was it? Calla straightened. Yes. You're Darian's new advisor? She hesitated. Temporary assistant. Of course, he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Interesting hire. The woman beside him, one of the legal advisors, added, You flagged an inconsistency in our ledger. I flagged a duplicate charge, Calla said calmly. It's a very complex system, she replied with faint condescension. Easy to misread. Darian entered just in time to catch the tail end of the exchange. He took his seat at the head of the table and scanned the room. Calla was right, he said. We reviewed the entries this morning. Both invoices were paid for the same deliverable, weeks apart. Our vendor oversight process needs revisiting. The room fell silent. He could have stopped there, but he didn't. For those wondering, Darian continued, she was brought on because I trust her perspective. You're not required to agree with it, but you will treat it with respect. No one spoke. Not out loud, at least. But their faces said plenty. After the meeting, Darian and Calla walked the corridor together. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. I can handle myself. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to fight every room alone. Calla gave him a sidelong glance. You ever get tired of always being the one who has to push back? All the time, he said. But silence built this mess. I'm done staying quiet. Back in her office, Calla found a sticky note on her desk. Watch your tone next time. L. She held it between her fingers for a moment, then calmly crumpled it and tossed it into the bin. If this was how they wanted to play, fine. She wasn't here to be liked. She was here to do her job. It started with lunch. Not a formal invitation, just a quiet knock on her glass door. Have you eaten? Darian asked, holding 2 paper bags. Kitchen sent up too much. She raised an eyebrow. Accident or convenient excuse? Maybe both. They ate in his office. No fancy dishes, just grilled chicken, rice, and a shared box of fruit slices. He didn't say much at first. Neither did she. The silence wasn't awkward, though. It was thoughtful. Do you miss it? She asked after a while. Miss what? Being everywhere. On panels. On magazine covers. Running 5 meetings at once. He leaned back in his chair. Not as much as I thought I would. She nodded. I've never had any of those things, but I've imagined them. He studied her. What did you imagine for yourself? Calla hesitated. A little cafe. Brick walls. Old jazz playing in the corner. I'd bake. Serve. Maybe teach kids how to make bread on weekends. That's not just a dream, he said. That's a plan. She smiled, softly. Feels far away. It's not. Another silence passed. From that day, lunches became regular. Some days were rushed, between back-to-back meetings and crisis calls. Other times, they sat by the windows, quiet and reflective. They didn't talk about board politics or quarterly losses. They talked about childhood, first jobs, and regrets they hadn't said out loud before. Calla told him about her mom, how she worked 3 jobs and still managed to leave notes in Calla's lunchbox. How Calla had promised herself she'd never settle for survival. Darian shared stories from the early startup days. coding until sunrise, living off vending machine meals, the time they lost their biggest investor because he refused to wear a tie to a pitch. You, she laughed, too casual for a pitch? I thought being brilliant excused bad fashion. Turns out, it doesn't. They laughed more than either expected. And slowly, the space between them shifted. Calla stopped flinching when she walked into meetings. Darian started looking at her during briefings, not for answers but for clarity, a silent check-in. She challenged him in ways no one else dared to. "No offense," she once said during a project review, "but you're over-explaining a weak decision." He blinked, then grinned. "Fair, you're too close to it. I usually am." They were opposites in almost every way, but something between them worked. There was no power play, no agenda, just honesty, and that made it dangerous, in the way anything honest and unexpected tends to be. The deal was supposed to be routine. Valecorp had been working for months on a partnership with Stratton Holdings, an international logistics firm with deep pockets and even deeper clauses. The contract had already passed legal review, and the board was eager to finalize it. Calla wasn't even invited to the negotiation prep. She found the folder on her desk by accident, left there by someone from operations who thought it was her task to color-code the meeting handouts. She opened it out of curiosity, flipping through the legal jargon and finance tables. She was halfway through the third page when something made her pause. Clause 12B, buried under restructuring rights and post-merger provisions, was a statement that looked harmless. In the event of a material loss to the partner's executive team, lead control may be assumed by Stratton Holdings for a probationary term of up to 18 months. Calla blinked. That sounded off. She read it again. Material loss, lead control. It was vague, intentionally vague. She highlighted it and walked straight into Darian's office, contract in hand. "Got a second?" He looked up. "Always." She set the paper down and pointed. "This. If something happens to you, Stratton takes over." Darian frowned. "That's not what we negotiated." "I know. But it's in there." He read the line 3 times. Then again, slowly. "This wasn't in the summary," he muttered. "Because it's not flagged as a risk clause. It's buried in the appendix." Darian stood, grabbing his phone. Cancel the call with Stratton. Delay the meeting. His assistant poked her head in a few minutes later. "Everything okay?" "No," he said. "But it will be." Later that day, a revised contract was circulated. Calla's name wasn't on any official memo, but Darian made a point to speak up during the next strategy check-in. "We nearly signed away executive control today," he said calmly. "A buried clause nearly handed over our decision-making rights for over a year." Several executives turned, startled. "It's handled now," he continued. "But let it be known, Calla caught it. Not legal, not compliance, Calla." A few looked away. One person, Ms. Bristol from HR, smiled just a little. After the meeting, Calla packed up her notes, ready to head out for the day, when Darian appeared in her doorway. "You saved us today." "I read slow," she replied, smirking. "You read deep. There's a difference." She shrugged. "I like spotting what people try to hide." He paused, then added, "Same." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken things lingering. "Good night, Calla." "Good night, Darian." The door closed softly behind him. Calla didn't notice it at first. Not when the office manager brought her a second monitor without her asking. Not when one of the finance interns quietly slid her the latest reports without being prompted. Not even when the head of legal held the elevator door for her and said, "Nice work on that clause catch." But it was happening. The air had shifted. Where there had been side eyes and passive-aggressive comments, there was now a quiet respect. Uneasy, sure, but real. At the next board update, no one questioned her presence. When she handed Darian a highlighted summary of the new vendor streamlining process, he didn't even look. He just passed it around the table, saying, "Let's lead with this." No one argued. That evening, as most of the office emptied, Calla stayed behind, buried in a spreadsheet. Darian appeared beside her with 2 mugs of tea. "No late meeting?" she asked. "No." Just figured you wouldn't stop working unless someone interrupted you. She smiled, accepting the mug. You figured right. They sat in silence at first, the buzz of the city lights outside softening the edges of the long day. You've changed the way this place breathes, Darian said suddenly. She looked over. That a compliment or a warning? He chuckled. A compliment, definitely. She stirred her tea. It doesn't always feel welcome. Change never does. Calla leaned back. You think they'll accept me? Some already do. Others won't, until you've sat in 10 more meetings, caught 10 more things, saved 10 more deals. She raised an eyebrow. That's exhausting. It is, he admitted. But they'll come around, because you're not here to impress them. You're here to fix what they stopped seeing. She studied him for a moment. And what about you? What about me? You brought me in. You trust me. But what are we doing, Darian? The question hung in the air, not heavy, not loaded. Just honest. He didn't rush to answer. I don't know, he said. I just know I look forward to you being here. She nodded slowly. Me too. The moment passed, but something unspoken settled between them, like two people who had been standing on opposite cliffs and just realized the bridge between them was already built. Later that night, as Calla walked toward the elevator, she glanced back. Darian was still at his desk, watching her leave, not with urgency, not with expectation, just with quiet attention. And something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. It started with a headline. Mystery woman in Vale Corp's war room. Who is she? At first, Calla thought it was a joke, a one-off blog post desperate for traffic. But then came the whispers in the elevator, the photographers across the street, a grainy photo of her entering the building, her name misspelled in the caption. Waitress turned advisor raises eyebrows inside Vale Corp. By the end of the day, her inbox was full, some offering interviews, others digging for dirt. One even claimed to be writing a redemption profile. She deleted them all. Still, the damage was done. When she walked through the office now, people looked longer, spoke quieter. Some were curious, some resentful. The worst part? She wasn't sure where the leak had come from. That evening, she sat alone in the break room, picking at a granola bar. Darian found her there. They're bored, he said, leaning against the doorframe. When people don't understand something, they create stories. I didn't sign up to be a story. You didn't, but you became part of one anyway. Calla looked away. I'm not built for this kind of attention. You're stronger than you think. She didn't respond. But something in her eyes told him the headlines had hit deeper than she was letting on. The power cut just after 8. No warning. 1 second, the office buzzed with fluorescent light and background noise. Then silence swallowed everything. Calla froze at her desk, startled by the sudden dark. Only the soft glow of the emergency lights along the floor remained. Outside the windows, the entire city skyline flickered and faded. System-wide outage, a voice called from the hallway. She grabbed her phone. No signal. A few employees trickled toward the elevators, already debating whether to brave the traffic or wait it out. Most chose to leave. Calla stayed. She wandered toward the executive lounge, more out of curiosity than need. The space felt different without lights, like the building had exhaled. Inside, she found Darian. He stood near the window, a half-open bottle of wine on the table beside him. A playlist hummed softly from a Bluetooth speaker, something slow, instrumental, almost mournful. You stayed, he said, eyes reflecting the faint city glow. So did you. He gestured to the couch. Sit. She hesitated, then nodded. He poured 2 glasses and handed her one. Looks like the universe decided we needed a break. Calla sipped. You always drink red wine during blackouts. He chuckled. Only when the world forces me to stop pretending I'm fine. The music filled the silence. For once, no alerts, no emails, no eyes watching, just quiet. They talked about nothing and everything, about missed birthdays, family traditions, the way life used to feel before pressure made every decision a gamble. Eventually, the wine loosened their voices. I didn't know how numb I'd gotten, Darian admitted. Until you showed up. Calla looked at him, startled. He held her gaze. You reminded me what it feels like to be seen. She didn't speak right away, just watched him, the lines in his face softer in the candlelight. It was a different kind of honesty. Not strategic, not polished, just real. The kind that only shows up when everything else fades away. The music played on, low, steady, like a heartbeat. Calla set her glass down. I didn't come here for this, she whispered. I know. I don't even know what this is. Darian leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. He didn't reach for her, didn't press. Neither do I, he said. But I know it's real. Calla looked down at her hands. They were trembling, not from fear but from something else. Something fragile. I've worked so hard not to feel, she admitted. To just keep going. To not get attached. Darian nodded. Same. The pause between them grew heavier, but not uncomfortable. He reached for her hand, slowly, gently, gave her enough space to pull away. She didn't. Their fingers touched. Not fire, not electricity, just warmth. When she looked up, his face was close enough to feel the shift in his breath. Her eyes searched his, as if asking permission. He answered by not moving, giving her the choice. She leaned in first. Their lips met slowly, soft, thoughtful, not desperate. It wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about erasing wounds. It was two tired hearts finding quiet in the same place. They stayed there for a while, lips barely moving, foreheads touching, the world outside forgotten. Neither one said a word, because in that moment, there was nothing left to explain. The kiss deepened, not hurried, not hungry, just patient, like they both knew the world would return soon, and this moment was theirs alone. Calla leaned into him, her hand resting lightly on his chest. She felt his heart beneath her palm, steady, strong, and unmistakably real. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch reverent. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his. Still no words, just understanding. When he stood and reached for her hand, she took it. No hesitation. He led her across the room, past the couch, through a side hallway she hadn't noticed before, until they reached a quiet guest room tucked away behind a sliding door. The city outside remained dark. Inside, everything slowed. There was no rush, no performance, just closeness. Fingers traced skin like memory. Clothes fell away, not for show, but as an invitation to truth. Their bodies moved with care, like two people writing something neither of them had dared to speak. It wasn't fireworks. It was softness. It was breath and trust. And a quiet yes whispered with every touch. When they lay still afterward, wrapped in each other skin to skin, heart to heart, neither reached for their phones. No one checked the time. They just listened to the stillness, the rain returning lightly outside, and the rhythm they had somehow created together. The first thing Calla noticed was the light, soft and grey, filtering through half-closed blinds. The city was stirring again, the outage over, the hum of traffic distant but steady. She blinked slowly, her cheek resting on his chest. Darian's arm was wrapped around her waist, his breathing even. The weight of the night lingered between them, but not in a heavy way. She didn't feel wrong. She felt aware. Careful not to wake him, she slipped out from under the covers, searching the room for her clothes. One by one, she gathered the pieces of herself and dressed in silence. In the mirror, she looked the same, but nothing felt the same. A knock came gently at the door. She opened it to find Darian already dressed, coffee in hand, expression unreadable but warm. "Didn't want to wake you," he said. "I was already up." He handed her the cup. "Milk, no sugar." "That's right, yeah?" She nodded. They stood there in silence for a few long seconds. It wasn't awkward, just different now. "I don't regret last night," he said, voice low. "Me neither, but it changes things." She nodded. "Yeah, it does." Neither of them tried to define what those changes meant. Not yet. But something in the way he looked at her, gentle, steady, told her he wasn't about to run. She took a slow sip of coffee, then said, "So, what now?" Darian leaned against the doorframe, coffee in hand, eyes never leaving hers. "So, what now?" Calla had asked. He didn't answer right away, because he didn't want to offer something careless. "We keep moving forward," he finally said. Carefully, Calla exhaled. "You think we can?" He nodded. "If we're honest. With them, with each other, with ourselves." The elevator pinged softly down the hall. The world was waking up. Their world, the one with deadlines and headlines and stairs, was waiting just around the corner. Calla looked back at the bed, neatly made now, like nothing had happened. But something had. Not just a kiss, not just a night, a shift. "I don't want to become your weakness," she whispered. "You're not," he replied. "You're the reason I'm not numb anymore." That stopped her. He stepped closer. "We can define this how we want," he added, "not how they expect." She looked up at him, chin lifted slightly. "You still sure you want to trust me with this? With this company? With you?" His answer was simple. Yes. They didn't kiss again. They didn't need to. They just walked out, side by side, into whatever came next. Would you cross the line if it meant risking everything you've built? Would you follow your heart even if it costs your reputation? Tell us below. And if Calla and Darian's journey pulled at something inside you, tap that like button, subscribe, and share this story with someone who believes in second chances. It took less than 48 hours for the world to catch up. At first it was whispers, half-baked blog posts and blurry speculation. But once the photos surfaced, all doubt was gone. Calla and Darian, leaving the building together, late evening, her coat draped over one arm. His hand was resting lightly on the small of her back. It wasn't scandalous, it wasn't staged, but it was enough. The image went viral before noon. By lunch, it was headlining every business column, with headlines like, "Who is she? The assistant behind Vale Corp's rebound and the CEO's arm. Romance or nepotism? A new distraction for Vale Corp. Cinderella or strategist?" A closer look at Calla Morgan. Calla sat frozen at her desk, the screen lit up with 100 versions of her face. Different angles, different filters, same judgment. Some praised her, most didn't. Her name trended for the first time in her life, for all the wrong reasons. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Comments poured in. Anonymous users picked apart her outfits, her posture, her smile. They found her high school photos. An old YouTube video of her baking banana bread from 5 years ago surfaced with a new caption, "The girl who baked her way into a billionaire's heart." By mid-afternoon, her email had been suspended for internal review. And the looks, they were different now, not curious, accusing. By the next morning, it wasn't just photos. It was a full-scale media storm. They found her childhood home, posted images of the rundown brick building with the peeling fence. They pulled her old diner schedules, found footage of her handing out menus, and blasted headlines like, "From burgers to boardrooms, a gold digger's timeline, no degree, no credentials, all charm. How did she land Vale Corp's most eligible man?" Every piece of her life was twisted into ammunition. They questioned everything, her intentions, her silence, her angle. One anchor even ran a segment asking if she had set her sights on him from the beginning. Calla watched in disbelief. They didn't see strategy. They didn't see integrity. They saw a woman who shouldn't be where she was. And they wanted her gone. Her mother called in tears. Friends from her past reached out, some to defend her, others fishing for their spotlight. But Calla, she stayed silent, not because she didn't have a response, but because she knew the second she said anything, it would only pour gasoline on the fire. Still, behind her calm exterior, something inside her began to ache. Not because they misunderstood her, but because part of her wondered if Darian regretted ever letting her in. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 7:30 a.m. Calla wasn't invited. She sat in the hallway outside the conference room, the thick doors muffling the rising voices on the other side. She didn't need to hear the words. She already knew. Inside, the tone was sharp. We have PR firms panicking. Shareholders are asking questions. This looks personal, not professional. Darian, it's about appearances now. The perception of control. Darian didn't flinch. She's done nothing wrong. That doesn't matter, one board member snapped. Right now, she's a distraction, a liability. If you want to protect this company, she has to go. Darian leaned forward, voice steady. You're not asking me to manage a problem. You're asking me to punish someone who told the truth, worked harder than most of you ever noticed, and stayed quiet while you let rumors decide her worth. No one responded, because they knew he was right, but they also didn't care. It's her or your credibility, someone said. The silence afterwards said everything. Darian stood. Then I'll decide. He walked out of the room, calm, composed, and found Calla still sitting there, staring down at her chipped nails. She looked up. They want me gone. Yes. And you? He didn't answer. Not yet. Calla didn't cry. Not when the tabloids accused her. Not when the board tried to bury her. But now, standing in Darian's office, file in hand, name in ink, she felt something break. She'd come in only to collect her things, to walk away with her head high, but a folder had been left on her desk. A contract, tucked inside, equity documentation, her name, her signature, ownership, 15% stake in Vale Corp Food Tech Initiative. What is this? She asked, storming into Darian's office, her voice sharp with disbelief. You gave me equity? He stood slowly. Not given. Allocated. You signed a portion of your company over to me and didn't mention it. I filed the papers weeks ago. It was part of the restructuring. You helped build it. But I didn't ask for this, she said, heat rising in her chest. You gave it to me like a favor. No, he said calmly. I gave it to you because you earned it, and because I trusted you before. I loved you. The words landed hard. Calla stared at him, her throat tightening. You should have told me. I didn't want it to feel like a transaction, he said. You're not a headline. You're not a rumor. You're a partner. She looked at the paper again. Not a gift, a responsibility, a title she never expected, and a deeper question she couldn't avoid. Was she ready to fight for it? They expected her to disappear. They expected her to hide behind Darian or resign quietly with a scripted statement. Instead, Calla showed up. Early. Hair tied back. No makeup. Dressed simply in the same blazer she wore on her first day. The one no one had complimented. She walked past the news vans, past the photographers yelling her name, past the gasps in the lobby, straight through the front doors. At her desk, she opened her laptop like it was any other Tuesday. Within minutes, the floor buzzed. A senior exec approached, hands folded. It's bold. You coming in? I have work to do, she said, without looking up. A communications intern slipped her a post-it. Love your spine. She didn't smile. Not yet. The whispers didn't stop. The judgment didn't fade. But she moved through the building like none of it could touch her, even when the board members passed her with narrowed eyes. Even when reporters waited outside for a reaction, she gave them nothing but presence. Not defiance, not tears, just steel. And behind the walls of Vale Corp, people started to take notice, not just of the noise around her, but the way she didn't bend. By noon, Darian was in her office, door closed, tone hushed, eyes full of concern. You didn't have to come in today, he said. I would have backed you from wherever you chose to stand. Calla looked up from her screen. And what? Let them write my silence into their version of the story. They've crossed lines, Calla. It's vicious out there. I know. I can make a statement. I'll pull legal. We'll flip the narrative. She shook her head. That's not what I need. He took a step closer. Then tell me what you do. She stood, quiet but firm. I need to own this, not just survive it, not because I'm trying to prove I deserve this seat, but because I already know I do. Darian studied her, truly saw her. Not the assistant he'd hired, not the woman the world had twisted into a tabloid character, but the force she'd become. "You're braver than I ever was," he said. Calla smirked. "Took long enough for you to notice." He smiled, but his eyes stayed serious. "Just say the word, and I'll run through whatever fire comes next." "I appreciate that," she said. "But this one, I'm walking into it myself." The annual company event wasn't meant to be dramatic. Just a mid-quarter mixer. Finger foods. Investor handshakes. Soft jazz in the background. But as Darian introduced the leadership team, he paused on stage, then looked directly toward the side wing. "Calla." He gave a slight nod. The room followed his gaze. The whispers started again. She took the stage slowly. No script, no teleprompter. Just truth. She stood behind the mic, scanning a room that hadn't invited her, but couldn't ignore her now. "I wasn't supposed to speak tonight," she began. "Some of you may even wish I didn't." A few in the crowd shifted. "But if I've learned anything in the last few weeks, it's that silence gives power to the wrong version of the story." She paused. "My name is Calla Morgan. I didn't come from wealth. I didn't arrive here through connections. I came through the front door, carrying nothing but work ethic and instinct." She looked directly at a group of executives seated near the front. "And if that makes people uncomfortable, maybe it should. Quiet, focused. But I'm not leaving, because I've earned my place, not by playing a role, but by doing the work every single day, a beat. I'm not here because someone gave me a seat at the table. I'm here because I built one and brought receipts." The room didn't erupt. It held still, listening, and, slowly, clapping. It started with one hand, then two, then the room rose. Not everyone, but enough. By the next morning, the clip had been viewed over 6 million times. Calla's voice, clear, steady, unshaken, played on phones, tablets, news segments, and trending reels. Hashtags filled the feed. Hashtag Calla spoke, hashtag earned, not given, hashtag she did the work. The commentary shifted almost overnight. She's not what they said she was. She walked in uninvited and stayed because she proved it. Smart, composed, unapologetic. News anchors backpedaled. Magazines requested interviews. Universities emailed about guest lectures. But Calla didn't rush to answer. She still showed up to work early, still answered her emails, still reviewed contracts like every decimal mattered. When Darian stepped into her office the next day, he held out his phone, where her speech was paused mid-sentence. "You realize this makes you more influential than half the board, right?" She gave a tired smile. "Guess they'll just have to adjust." He watched her for a moment. No CEO mask, no defense. Just a man looking at the woman who had redefined what strength looked like. "I'm proud of you," he said. She didn't look away. "I'm proud of me too." Outside her window, the city moved on. But inside those walls, a new story had taken root. One she wrote with her voice, her choices, and her spine. Calla didn't take a victory lap. She got to work. The first thing she did was request the organizational map. Every department, every decision-maker, every team that had been left on autopilot for too long. Some were bloated. Others are barely staffed. Processes overlapped, wasting time and money. Contracts were outdated. A few vendors were billing without delivery records. She made notes. Color-coded, labeled, sorted. Then she made cuts, not out of vengeance, but efficiency. She sat in meetings and asked hard questions. What problem does this position solve? When was the last time this team exceeded expectations? Who here is coasting, and who's quietly holding the place together? Her tone wasn't cold. It was direct. Some didn't take it well. One department head scoffed, "You don't have the background to make these decisions." She calmly slid a binder across the table. "I do. You just never noticed I was watching." By the end of the month, 2 departments had been merged. A redundant analytics team was let go. Policies around vendor accountability were rewritten. People murmured that she was tougher than Darian. She didn't argue. She was. But she was also fair. Those who worked hard, spoke up, and brought ideas. She promoted them fast, gave quiet talent louder titles, built mentorship circles within teams, scheduled coffee chats with junior staff, and in every conversation, she asked the same thing: what would make this work better for you? It wasn't just about performance, it was about ownership, and people responded. They stayed late, not out of fear but pride. They submitted proposals on weekends. They believed in the change because they could see themselves in it. Even the old guard executives had to admit productivity was climbing. And the culture? It was starting to breathe again. The idea came from a whiteboard scribble in a meeting no one was paying attention to. Vale Corp's food distribution division had long been buried under larger projects, underfunded, underpromoted, and full of missed opportunities. But Calla saw something different in it, something scalable. She pulled together a small team, half experienced, half overlooked. They studied food deserts, regional supply gaps, and emerging tech that could streamline community-based delivery logistics. Calla mapped it out on sticky notes and spreadsheets. What started as an internal pilot became Project Reach. Within 6 weeks, they launched in 3 underserved cities. By the end of the quarter, Project Reach tripled its projected impact, cutting delivery costs by 18%, increasing vendor partnerships, and gaining national press for its social impact. Calla didn't hide behind a press team. She stepped in front of the cameras, and people listened. A CNBC host opened with, "Calla Morgan, former waitress turned executive, now leading Vale Corp's most profitable division this quarter. How does it feel?" She smiled, steady. "It feels earned." She spoke with clarity, not arrogance, data-backed, solution-focused, and refreshingly unfiltered. Headlines changed tone. Morgan delivers. The woman behind Vale Corp's turnaround Project Reach is more than profitable. It's personal, not just his assistant. Now she's leading the mission. Internally, some execs expected Darian to reassert himself, to reclaim the spotlight. He didn't. He stayed behind the scenes, offered a strategy when asked, watched quietly while Calla did what few had ever done at Vale Corp: lead without fear. By mid-quarter, Project Reach had expanded to 5 more cities. External partners called requesting her, not the team. Investors were asking for meetings, not with Darian, with Calla. Her name carried weight now, not because of who she was dating, but because of what she'd built. The emails started as one-liners. "Saw your segment. Needed that today. First time I've ever seen someone like me talk numbers like that on air. You made me rethink how I show up in rooms I used to shrink in." Then came the threads. Female founders, freelancers, assistants, VPs, baristas with side hustles. They weren't just watching. They were shifting. A local startup invited Calla to speak at their accelerator brunch. She declined the spotlight, but offered to sit in quietly and mentor 3 early-stage founders instead. They posted a photo of her sketching on a napkin with them. It went viral. Again, no panel, no ego, just game-changing insight over cold coffee. Soon, women were quoting her in meetings. "If Calla Morgan doesn't apologize for being smart, neither will I." At one tech event, a young engineer approached her nervously. "I was going to quit," she said. "Everyone kept overlooking me. But then you said I didn't arrive with permission. I arrived with purpose. And I stayed." Calla didn't know what to say. So, she just hugged her. She didn't try to become a symbol. She didn't post motivational captions or sell workshops. She just kept working, kept listening, kept opening doors, then holding them long enough for someone else to walk through. One VC firm created a spotlight series called N. Morgan Models, highlighting overlooked women in business doing extraordinary things. A publishing company offered her a book deal. She declined. For now, this wasn't about branding. This was about building. Even Darian noticed the shift. At lunch one day he said, "They're not just watching you, they're organizing around you." Calla raised an eyebrow. "That's your way of saying I started something? That's my way of saying it's not about me anymore." And I like it. She smirked. You sure your ego's okay with that? It's more than okay, he said. It's relieved, because finally, someone else was driving, and the whole world was ready to follow. In another version of the story, Darian might have felt threatened. He'd built Vale Corp from a napkin sketch in a campus dorm. He'd weathered boardroom betrayals, watched his name trend for all the wrong reasons, and carried the company through storms most CEOs would have walked away from. But now, it was Cala's name they chanted at product launches. Her quotes on mugs, her ideas in strategy decks, her voice is in every investor roundtable. And Darian. He stood to the side, hands behind his back, watching. Proudly. He showed up to events, but never spoke over her. Sat in the front row, never on the stage. When interviewers asked about his company's comeback, he gently redirected, "It wasn't me this time. This win belongs to Cala." Some executives thought it was performative, but it wasn't. It was practiced humility, the kind that knew when to lead and when to get out of the way. In private, he offered insight, perspective, sometimes caution, but in public, he made sure no one confused her brilliance with his endorsement. She didn't need him to vouch for her. She'd already earned it. One afternoon, as they shared coffee in the break room, Cala looked up mid-email. "Is it weird?" she asked. "Watching me take over something you started?" He shook his head. "It's what I always hoped would happen." "What?" "That someone would do it better than me." She blinked. "You think I'm doing it better?" "I know you are." Cala didn't reply right away. Her throat tightened just a little. Not because she doubted him, but because she finally believed it too. He wasn't a stepping stone. She wasn't a shadow. This was a passing of power, not out of pity, but trust. And trust like that didn't need microphones. It just needed room to breathe. It was meant to be a harmless media panel. Topic: women in leadership, a trend or a turning point. Cala hesitated before agreeing. She didn't love the headline, but agreed to participate for one reason: visibility matters. Not for her. For the women watching. She arrived early, calm, prepared, hair pulled back, notes in her head, not her hands. But when the show went live, it was clear someone had another agenda. Across from her sat Brennan Cross, venture capitalist, known for aggressive portfolio takeovers and thinly veiled cynicism. 10 minutes in, he struck. "I have to ask," he said, his smile tight. "How much of your company's turnaround was strategy, and how much was relationship leverage?" The host stiffened. The audience stilled. Cala didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly. "Are you suggesting that romantic partnerships invalidate professional decisions?" "I'm suggesting the lines get blurry," he replied. "Only for people who assume women can't build unless they're borrowing someone else's name." He blinked. "I entered this company as a problem solver, not a plus one," she continued. "I wasn't handed the role. I uncovered fraud, saved contracts, and designed a logistics model that grew Q3 returns by double digits." She smiled. "Just enough. And, for the record, I've been underestimated longer than you've had that chair." The host smirked. Audience members nodded. Brennan tried to pivot, but it didn't matter. The clip went viral before the show ended. Millions watched her calmly dismantle bias, not with anger, but precision. Comments poured in. She didn't just defend her seat, she redefined the table. More CEOs like Cala, less egos like Brennan. Proof that poise wins when power gets petty. Cala turned off her phone and went back to work. That night, Darian left a post-it on her screen. "You were the headline. Again. This time, for all the right reasons." She didn't need to reply. Her work, her words, were doing just fine on their own. By the start of the new quarter, Vale Corp wasn't just surviving, it was soaring. The stock, once shaky and shadowed by scandal, climbed steadily over 4 weeks. Analysts who had written off the company as unstable now used terms like resilient, agile, and forward-thinking. Internal reports showed the highest employee satisfaction rates in 5 years. Turnover dropped. Promotion requests rose. Investors stopped asking, "Who's running things now?" They knew. Cala's face graced business publications, not just as a feature, but as proof. That transformation doesn't require pedigree. That vision doesn't always come from the usual rooms. She didn't run victory laps. She showed up, reviewed numbers, walked floors, ate lunch with interns, skipped the press dinners to sit in strategy sessions. When she presented at the quarterly investor meeting, the room was full, but still, she spoke with quiet confidence, charted growth, listed risk mitigation steps, and outlined the next rollout phase of Project Reach. One board member leaned over to another mid-meeting and whispered, "She doesn't just sound like a CEO, she commands like one." Darian sat 3 rows back. No notes, no spotlight, just pride. After the presentation, a new investor pulled her aside. "I didn't think you'd last," he admitted. "Thought the headlines would break you." Cala didn't blink. "They didn't make me. So they couldn't break me." He extended a hand. "Glad you proved me wrong." She shook it. Firm, unapologetic. By the end of the week, the stock ticked up another 2 points. Press dubbed it the Morgan recovery. Darian never corrected them. Because it was true. She hadn't just filled a gap. She rebuilt the structure. Not with force. Not with flash. With clarity, conviction, and the kind of leadership that doesn't chase applause. Because it's too busy doing the work. It was late. Most of the building was dark, but Cala's office glowed with warm lamplight. She stood by the window, sipping ginger tea, scanning a proposal draft for an international expansion pitch. A soft knock. She turned. "Darian." "No one's around," he said. "Thought you might still be here." She smiled. "You know me." He stepped inside, holding a folder under his arm. "I need your eyes on something." "Something urgent?" "No," he said. "Something important." He handed her the folder. Inside, projections for a tech acquisition. Solid, but risky. "I've looked at this 6 times, he admitted. "Feels good, but something's off." Cala took a seat, flipping pages. Quiet, focused. When she reached the final page, she looked up. "They're burying their debt risk," she said. Line 6, page 14. "It's phrased like a growth fund, but it's masking instability." Darian exhaled. "I knew something was wrong." She closed the folder gently and handed it back. "Don't take the deal. Not this quarter." He nodded. "That's what I needed to hear." There was no pretense now. No mentor. No student. Just 2 leaders. One turning to the other because he trusted her judgment. Because he needed her judgment. "You've built something rare here," he said quietly. "Not just the numbers. The culture. The trust." Cala sat back, watching him carefully. "It's never been about being right, Darian. It's about staying real when everyone else is performing." He nodded slowly. "I used to think legacy was about being remembered," he said. "Now I think it's about who you hand the reins to." Cala didn't respond with flattery. She didn't need to. She just met his eyes and said, "You built a door. I walked through. Now we build more." Darian smiled, not with pride, but peace. In that moment, it was clear. The company was no longer in recovery mode. It had direction. It had momentum. And more than anything, it had her, Cala Morgan, the woman no one saw coming. Now the one they all looked to first. Sometimes the most powerful stories don't begin with a spotlight. They begin with a tired woman walking home in the rain, with a question at a fogged window. "Are you okay?" Cala Morgan never meant to change a life that night. She only meant to help. But that one decision, rooted in instinct, not strategy, rewrote everything. We see her in a diner apron, flour on her cheek, name tag hanging slightly crooked, scrubbing counters, smiling through exhaustion, counting cash, 20 short for rent. Then we see her months later, walking through glass doors, hair tied back, papers in hand. Calm, capable, fierce, the same woman, but not the same story. This wasn't a fairy tale. There were no glass slippers, no fairy godmother. There were leaked photos, accusations, whispers in boardrooms, offers wrapped in suspicion, but she didn't run. She stood, even when the world labeled her, even when the board pushed back, even when her heart was unsure and her name was trending for all the wrong reasons. She didn't defend herself with noise. She defended herself with work. Calla caught billing fraud on her first day. Facing the board, eyes steady, rising to applause after her viral speech, side by side with Darian, but never behind him. She wasn't just given a seat. She restructured the table, elevated others, showed that leadership isn't about shouting, it's about listening, about showing up, about rewriting the narrative, even when people keep trying to type you out of it. Calla stands on the rooftop of the Vale Corp headquarters. The city pulses beneath her in soft gold. Darian joins her, 2 glasses in hand. No grand celebration, no cheering crowd. Just the woman who changed everything and the man who nearly lost everything until she reminded him who he was. They clink glasses, a quiet toast, a soft kiss. No spectacle, just 2 people who found each other when neither was looking. "Thank you," she says, voice barely above a whisper, "for believing in me before I could see it myself." He doesn't answer with words. He doesn't need to. She helped a stranger once. Now she's built an empire, with him by her side. Help doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's quiet and life-changing. The world may try to reduce you to where you came from. Don't let it. Real strength isn't in proving your worth. It's in knowing it. Sent love doesn't always arrive with roses. Sometimes it shows up in soaked shoes and a borrowed steering wheel. Don't wait for permission to lead. Start where you are and keep showing up. If this story touched something in you, don't scroll past. Like it, share it, comment below. Would you help someone who's falling, even if it meant falling a little yourself? And hit subscribe, because here on Mr. Leonardo Stories, we don't just tell stories, we feel them.